Good evening or good morning, wherever you are in the world. This is Joe Atwill with Jan Irvin, and we are here to give another rendition of the show UnSpun. This will be a little bit different kind of a show. Among other things, we're going to talk about the need for a donation. I know this is a hard subject to broach, but the network that has this show is certainly worthy of funds. Jan's effort at Gnostic Media is very, very valuable and deserves funding. And if people want to buy my books, that's also pleasing to me. We can all use money. So we have to bring this up, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later on. But we're also going to be talking about the passing of two people that are dear to me, and also to a gentleman that Jan knows. It's odd, but in this very recent period, there's been these three deaths, and the two that we'll be talking about first will be Charya S., Dorothy Murdoch, the Bible scholar, author of The Christ Conspiracy, who's someone that is oddly was known by Jan and me before we knew one another. We both knew Dorothy.
Yep.
And also the late, great Dave McGowan, who really, his work on Laurel Canyon is just completely critical for understanding American culture. And we'll be talking about Dave and his work, and our condolences to his family over his passing. And then another gentleman, someone who was a friend of Jan. Jan, you want to introduce us to this?
Sure. Well, George Clayton Johnson also died on Christmas Day along with Acharya. And of course, George Clayton Johnson is famous for writing several of the Twilight Zone episodes, the original ones. He also co-wrote several of the first Star Trek zones, Star Treks, including episode 1 of the original series. He wrote Logan's Run. He also wrote a number of other films. Geez, now I'm suddenly forgetting some of the films that George has written. He also wrote Ocean's 11 and the Kung Fu TV series and several other screenwrites and things like that. And George and I had been friends for about 24, 25 years. And so he was, I guess, about 90 by now, and but he passed the same day. So thought I'd mention that as well, because he's of course famous in the Hollywood area for his writing, and pretty much everyone in the world knows of his work, whether or not they knew him personally.
Sorry to hear that he passed away. So first, let's talk about the need for donations for CCN, for this network. Everything that, well, not everything, but a large fraction of what Jan and I show and write about, discuss on podcasts, indicates that mainstream media is not just bad, but it is corrupted. It is a tool of the oligarchs. It basically is a kind of weaponized anthropology that is designed to damage you, not just give you bad information, but literally damage you. And so, at this time, we can't detail all of that, but those of you who've been listening to the show over the last few weeks kind of will be starting to get the picture of what Jan and I feel about the mainstream media. And so it's just absolutely imperative that there is an alternative media. A people's media, a media that we can all participate in, a media that we can all vet. And so when you donate to CCN, you're really donating basically to one of the elements of a new media, an alternative to the weaponized anthropologic media of CNN, ABC, Fox News, the Disney films, things like this, which are designed to hurt you and are very cleverly crafted. We'll be exposing some of the craft involved in the way that these media representations hurt you. But CCN is something that you can support. You can help it become a powerful force. It is small right now, and you want this to grow. You want it to grow in terms of its technology. You want it to grow in terms of its broadcasting power. You want the people who bring it to you to have economic security, because believe me, I know Biggie pretty well, even though I've only known him for a short time, but I feel I know him fairly well. And I know that he is a righteous person who will not use your donations for anything other than trying to create more success for the network. So Jan, over to you. Any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, it's the mainstream, the MSM media is crumbling, and sources where people can turn to are very important. So it's very important to support the network, to donate what you can, because the alternative is without good information, without Joe and I coming to you live every week, without the other people. And what I think CCN has 25 weekly shows right now, and with more funding, with more hosts, etc. Eventually that could be a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week thing where you're getting, hopefully as good a content as the network can possibly bring you. Now, obviously with freedom of speech, there's a limit, but, or a fine line, I should say, between being able to vet people and, getting people that might not always be telling the truth on. So, of course, even that has to get out, but we have to have a place where we can get information out, inform people of how mind control works, inform people of the trivium method, et cetera, so that, that there is media to come to. And again, more and more people are waking up that the mainstream media is problematic. And like Joe said, it's not just bad. They're dirty. They're a tool of the oligarchs to control all of us, so where do we turn to, rather than, falling into other mainstream media, we have to be able to go somewhere. So there's that. And then on top of that, because CCN is such a small network, they can't afford to pay hosts like Joe and I or any of the other hosts that they have. So, Joe and I both need donations and funds to do our separate research. And then Joe and I collaborate on a lot of our research, and a lot of it we don't collaborate on. I still run my weekly podcast at Gnostic Media. Joe still has his weekly radio show, et cetera, that he does. And so we both take our time out of our schedules to bring this to you, in hopes that the public gets enough out of it to make it worth our while, and that you appreciate the information that we're bringing to the table, and, support that effort. So, Joe's site, Post Flaviana, my website, we have, the brain database up on my website, all of the podcasts, all of the different shows that I've done, et cetera. And then, again, same thing on Joe's site.
I have a question. I want to get into Gnostic Media website, but before I do that, how would you actually donate to CCN? Where is the donate button? How do people get to it?
Well, that's a good question. So, like, if they were on the Gnostic Media website, on the left under media categories is UnSpun on CCN, and they would, they could go there, or they can just go to consciousconsumernetwork.tv and go to the main website there, and it's pulling up right now. Excuse me a second. And they're in Europe, so it's taking a second for it to load on my side all of a sudden. So once you're on the CCN network website, and now it's playing. I'm getting feedback there. So I don't know if Biggie can. I know I've seen it a dozen times on there. If Biggie wants to jump in and tell us where the donate to CCN.
What I'm seeing is from Mel V. It's saying that Mel V. Can you put that back up, please, on the screen?
She says, fund CCN for 2016 or Consumer Network donations page would be the location. So
Okay. Could you just say that one more time, Jan? I'm sorry.
GoFundMe.com, Fund CCN for 2016, or consciousconsumernetwork.tv/donations-page. And if they could maybe, in the next week or so, if they put a big donate button right on the top of the website, that would
make it
help.
easier for people.
Yeah, make it easier, because I'm not finding it quickly enough. And on the front page on the Gnostic Media website, there is a big donate button there. So
yeah, Nine, can you bring that up so we can see the donate button on the screen?
Sure.
From Gnostic Media. I just want people to see it.
All right. So here's the Gnostic Media website, and here's the donate button right there on the front.
Right there. That gold with the black letters, that's where you would click to support.
Right. And then for those who don't know, the store page is here where they can order my books and bookmarks for the Trivium. The Gnostic Media archives are here. John Allegro's book that I publish, and then my own 2 books and DVD, my gluten wheat blows, bumper stickers, etc. up there. So all of this helps Gnostic Media continue to do what I do. And then, then we can bring you great interviews with people like Dave McGowan and, D.M. Murdoch, Acharya S., and George Clayton Johnson, the famous screenwriter, and bring you the Brain Database. And, so speaking of the Brain Database, here's that. And if you haven't been to the Gnostic Media website to check out the Brain Database, it's just, on the front page on this top menu here, just click on Brain, and it takes you to this page, and you'll see or not that page. It takes you to the one that you just saw, but then you can just click on the link and you can go straight into the Brain Research Database. And this is up to date. I keep everything up to date. As far as my current research, the web version is always up to date to my latest research. So whatever I was researching today, if I've cited it, which I always do, or do my best to always do, it's in here. So,
I just wanted to underline how important the Brain Database is, because when you have the ability to visually connect through the associations of individuals who are involved in the weaponized anthropology and the secret societies, it's a fascinating journey just of itself. I mean, I would recommend that everyone actually turn on the Brain Database and simply start following the connections so that you can really see how vast and also how limited the secret society is. You'll be able to see who is related to who and how they connect. And the point I was going to make is that the next time there is a media false flag event, some kind of terrorist event, go to the Brain Database and see if you can find a way to click into individuals who are, basically being talked about.
And that's a really good point. And, and to, for people to make better use of our time rather than emailing you or I, if we know about something, they should usually come here first and use the search button down here and type it in down here first and search the database and search, for related ideas before contacting us, because, what is in here is, for the most part, our current research. Like Joe might have more on Alan Trist, from the Tavistock Institute, who promoted the Grateful Dead, et cetera, than I do. But, the connections are still in there. So then you'd know that we do have information in here ahead of time before.
Right. And what people can do is that if they have information that should be a connection on this, they can then contact you on via email.
Well, and not only that, you can tell me where it should most likely be connected as well. So that way I'm not trying to figure out. You can send me the citation. Hopefully it's a primary. If it's a secondary, let me know, and then let me know exactly where in the database it should go. That will quicken my time to keep the database updated to the most current research. Send me the citations so that I can plug those in there with any connections. And then, everything is kept updated.
Right. And The brain is really a very important thing because it's the very first representation, even though it's not completely finished and probably never will be, but it is a project to actually outline and define the secret society, the society that controls science, media,
The intelligence community.
intelligence community, right? Exactly. And so when when we talk about the Tavistock Institute, when we talk about Freud's influence on Edward Bernays, who influenced Gregory Bateson, and how this process of cultural debasement ends up in the 60s with the Grateful Dead, here you have a way of actually seeing all of the connections and the relationships between the individuals involved literally through time, because the brain database will go back into the 15th century in some of its earliest representations.
Yep.
But also it will, as you walk through it, you can see the social connections and cultural connections that are actually in play as this process goes forward. So you can see how the Huxleys were connected to Darwin, were connected to the Wedgwoods, and you'll see that this group then connects back to the East-West Trading Association, to the Rothschilds, and to basically all of these slave systems that have been brought about over the last 300-400 years. So the brain database is something that I would hope everyone is familiar with and uses constantly. Help Jan update it, donate to Jan, who maintains this incredible interactive document and documentation. I mean, this really is the very first time that there's ever certainly been something this detailed in terms of the secret society. And by far, it's the first thing that's ever been interactive and where someone can actually use it so easily to walk through these things. I mean, for example, he just pulled up Alan Watts. Now, who would, Watts is famous for introducing Buddhism.
Hippie philosopher.
Right.
Brought us meditation and yoga.
Right. But when you see his connections, when you see the overall context, because I was doing a show the other day and I made the point, I said, look, so many of the things that are brought to us seem on their surface, feminism, integration, yoga, meditation. I mean, on the surface and as a separate, entity, it's just laughable to think that they could be culturally destructive. But you have to see, first of all, you have to always ask the question, is it possible to weaponize such a thing? And when you use the database, when you use the brain, you can see exactly how, as a overall construction of cultural debasement, all of these things are related, all of the individuals are related, which couldn't be circumstance. This is not something that could accidentally occur. When you have things as disparate as, the Beatles and the eugenics movement, and then suddenly the same people are connected, by a single iteration all through this matrix. Well, you're looking at a society. You're looking at some group that has slithered into the political control over Western culture, and this is a way to document it, and it's a way to help people defend themselves against it.
And so I was just showing people how we connect this stuff. Now, Alan Watts is actually the main person who introduced meditation to the United States. It appears that he was recruited to MK Ultra and the CIA around October 17, 1952, or before then. But in here are the citations, and this takes you to a page that shows you Alan Watts doing a TV show in the promoting meditation and Eastern philosophy for the West. And then we see in the brain database Alan Watts using the double bind, which Joe and I and Bill we've all done a show on meditation, mind control. And Bill Jocelyn did a episode with me called I think it was Meditation Mind Control. It's up on the Gnostic Media website. But we can see how Alan Watts utilized and promoted the double bind in meditation. And you can scroll down here and you should be able to find videos and everything that explain his promotion of the double bind through meditation, etc. But then we find out that the double bind was actually created by this guy, Gregory Bateson, who we keep bringing up every week. And Gregory Bateson was this guy who created this organization or helped found this organization known as the CIA. And so here we have, Alan Watts, who is close friends with Aldous Huxley, who ran MKUltra, promoting the CIA's double bind into the community through
right. And I just
meditation, etc.
And I just want to say that meditation, on its face, is there's obviously nothing innately wrong about it, but when it's part of an archaic revival, this is how it can be weaponized. And this is why when you use the brain database, you can go to someone like Watts. And one of the things that the brain database, I'm sure, will bring up is the houseboat conversation that Watts participated in with Leary and Ginsburg.
Yes, that was just on the screen, in fact.
Right. And now there, you see, and this just shows
Houseboat Summit right here.
Right. Now, when you listen to this, when you listen to Leary and Alan Watts, and you hear them describing all of these culturally retrograde behavior, all of this going back to nature, drug taking, now you have the context of understanding of exactly how these things were weaponized. Because when you start seeing the cultural degradation, when you start seeing things like the family breaking apart, then you can see how these things were used as weapons. And when you listen to the conversation at the Houseboat Summit, believe me, it's nothing but archaic revival. They're talking about, let's take this entire generation and take them out to communes. Well, it's just like the expression, turn on, tune in, and drop out. The drop out aspect was dropping out of a technical world, basically. That's what they were trying to do. That's what they were promoting. And the reason that they wanted to create the archaic revival is easy to see when you go forward and see all of these connections into Woodstock. Because at Woodstock you have, teenagers fornicating in the mud, listening to rhythm and blues music while they're on drugs. And so there's your archaic revival. And this is something that it took a lot of researchers decades to be able to understand. I mean, really, I think until Manufacturing the Deadhead, the article Jan and I put out, there really wasn't a complete expose of the whole process from Edward Bernays all the way into Woodstock. And so it took, and it wasn't, believe me, we were not working alone. We were using information that David McGowan had presented and a lot of other researchers. So this was it took decades to create this understanding. And now with the brain database, a person can start the process in a few days of interacting with this service that Jan is providing for free. You can go through all of that research.
Well, not only that, Joe, but I do allow people to download the database as well. I've been thinking about changing that to pay access to download it, but they can download the database, and every several months I'll put out a new database download file, which is easier to go through if you download the software than the web version. But so all of that stuff is up there. But, people need to support the work if they want the work to continue to be there, if they want CCN to continue to be here, if they want your work, et cetera. We need to see enough support to want to continue to do it. You guys need to, as much as we'd like, as much as people want this to be a nice communist world where you're not, where you don't need reward for hard work, that's not really how it works. And every commune, in fact, did fail that the CIA and those groups promoted. But, if we look at that as a microcosm to a larger scale, such as something like Russia, we see how these things fail every time. And we see that that's actually the result that they're looking to promote. And so, we need the reward. We need people to step up and say, hey, I find value in that. I find value in the network. I find value in Joe and Jan's work, et cetera. So support the network, support us hosts, et cetera. And then you don't have to listen to commercials either, by the way. I mean, I've never had a commercial on my show in 7.5 years I've been doing it.
Right. And yeah, and we don't do commercials. I mean, this is as much of a commercial as we'll ever do. And we're doing it because it's the end of the year and it's just sort of the classic time to make a request. And so we're putting it out there. It's, the work of an independent researcher or the life of an independent researcher is not one where there's a lot of financial rewards. The two people that passed away, Dave McGowan and Acharya, or Dorothy Murdoch, I don't think either one of them ever received great wealth. I think Dave may have been making some decent money with the latest book he did. I think it sold. I'm hoping that it sold very well. I don't know exactly the details, but I think it did. But I know that Dorothy Acharya was always struggling financially, and I knew her well. And in fact, we created a product together, a conversation on Caesar's Messiah that people can buy on Amazon or at the CaesarsMessiah.com website. But so Dorothy stayed with me and got to know her pretty well, and I knew some of the circumstances about her life, and she was a really good researcher. She was involved in a number of the Zeitgeist, for example. She was involved in that. And
yeah, well, that was where I met her. In fact, I knew her before then, but I met her at the first showing in LA of the Zeitgeist film, which they had used some of my stuff. And I have to say, I no longer support, especially what's in Zeitgeist 2 and 3. But I think that took the agenda in a whole different direction from Zeitgeist 1. But that was, where I met her, in fact, sitting in the audience,
yeah,
and next to each other.
Right. And so the thing is that, and Zeitgeist is a good example. I mean, Zeitgeist was using research that she had done. I don't know if she made money off of the film. I think not. And I think that that's kind of a good example of someone who does extraordinary research, but then, because of the nature of the internet, it's not easy to commercialize it. Zeitgeist was very, very popular. I don't know how even the creator of it ended up financially rewarded for the thing. But what it does is, the one reward that's certain is that it wakes people up. And Dorothy's work, she wrote the Christ Conspiracy, the greatest story ever sold.
And she wrote a bunch of books.
And she wrote tons of stuff. But
Christ in Egypt. In fact, I've got just about every book she wrote in the other room.
Right, and so she wrote a lot of work, and I think it was in total something that was very valuable. It woke a lot of people up to the possibility, or to the understanding that government uses religion as a tool, and that's kind of the main theme that all of these researchers, I mean, if you just stand back and look at Jan and myself and Dave McGowan and Dorothy and others, we're not the only ones. What you'll see is that they all do this tremendous amount of research, and most of it ends up basically just into the world of the internet for free without being any rewarded at all. And that is fine, because we don't do this to become wealthy. It's just that when people experience, the awakening, they start realizing that the government and the world is different than they think. It's not a bad thing to go back and financially reward the researcher that created the information, because there is just so little financial reward in this world. I know
Yeah,
that.
well, if I was making 2 or 3 times more a day, even, than that, I mean, I've been doing the show out of my kitchen here for almost 6 years. So what does that tell you, folks?
Yeah, and
See my kitchen in the background, see the pots and pans. That's a real kitchen. That's not some studio fake kitchen. That's
that's not a
where I
problem.
cook my breakfast, my dinner, you know.
Yeah, and so that's the world of the researcher. That's what we get. And so I think that all of us, in the new year, CN, Jan, myself, and I would hope that, I don't know how the estates are structured for Dave McGowan and for Acharya. I hope that they're in good order. I know Acharya has a son who's young, a young boy, not maybe, he's maybe a teenager now. But I know Dave had a family. And so I am hoping that, if you see something in Dave's work that is really important to you, or Acharya, I'm sure there's donate. You can still do that. The websites will be maintained in the coming years. And so that would be a way to posthumously reward these researchers. Hopefully Jan and I will not be asking for posthumous donations anytime soon, though.
And I did get a donation from Kathy a few minutes ago. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So anyway, that's okay. So Jan, anything else that you wanted to add to that?
Oh, I don't know. I suppose that's it, for the fundraising part. Why don't we get into, I don't know, you wanted to talk about Alan Trist possibly and some others?
Well, yeah, I mean, Alan Trist, he was a kind of manager for the Grateful Dead. What's important about him, and what's important about just this kind of research into the Grateful Dead, is that it shows that basically the entire band has connections that are visible in the brain. And there's so many, and they're so vast and so evil that without the brain, I don't think anyone could possibly understand them. And I don't think anyone could really ever see them all. Alan Trist was the son of one of the 3 individuals who created the Tavistock Institute. And the Tavistock Institute is something that is hard to understand. It has a strong Freudian component. So that when you talk about Edward Bernays, and if you look at the article Manufacturing the Deadhead, and you see all of the connections between Bernays and the counterculture, and to the extent that he was using weaponized psychology and weaponized anthropology to help bring this about, you can see that the Tavistock Institute has always been compromised. It's always been part of this nexus.
Well, would compromise be the right word? It was, I think, created for the purpose that it does.
Exactly. You're right. Wasn't compromised. Yeah, thank you. It was actually simply created as a control unit, as military intelligence.
Yeah, we see it coming out of the Club of Rome, funded by David Rockefeller, Arnold Toynbee, Ford Foundation. The Clive and Set Trilateral Commission. So this is who created the Tavistock Institute.
Right. And so now when you look at, and then, okay, now bear in mind that the Tavistock Institute, the connections between the Tavistocks and, say, the Beatles have never been, to my satisfaction, completely vetted.
Right. Now, yeah, that's because Coleman, where that citation comes from, can't be
trusted in that area.
Right.
However, the logical and circumstantial case is simply overwhelming. And when you look at the connection between Tavistock and the British Freemasons, and then when you look at all of the Freemasons on the cover of Sgt. Pepper, when you look at, for example, the decoding of I Am the Walrus that is available at postslaviana.org for free, you can just go and look at it. You can see that there was a controlled mechanism that the Freemasons were involved with that appears, it has legacy representation in the Sgt. Pepper album. And of course, the connections through Tavistock are very, very transparent. And I just wanted to mention one little aside, which I think is something, a little detail you could probably pick out in the brain database. Dr. Colin Ross pointed out that the very original LSD research in the United States, and this is going into the 1940s, was funded by the Freemasons. And this isn't some kind of conspiracy theory. I mean, this is, Colin actually gave Jan and I the citations.
Yes, he did.
And so
and I did verify that in the original CIA files as well.
Right. And so that you can see now when you look at the transparent connections between Freemasonry and the Tavistock Institute, the control over the Beatles and the LSD promotion that the Beatles were involved with, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which is an obviously homage to the drug, how they promoted LSD, as this great spiritual thing. They were the ground zero of the LSD culture in Britain. Now, when you then look at the Grateful Dead, right? When you look at the Grateful Dead in San Francisco, who are ground zero of the LSD culture in the United States, and then you see that their manager is Alan Triss. He's the son of one of the founders of the Tavistock. The brain shows you that this isn't some kind of connection that is random, because you see, this is the value of the brain, and it's why everyone needs to go to Gnostic Media site and get familiar with this, because, it might have been the case that Alan Triss was just some kind of lost soul whose father happened to be the founder of the Tavistock Institute, who then wandered to San Francisco and just out of an amazing circumstance, I mean, just, 1 in a billion, ended up as the manager of the Grateful Dead.
Right, and then the Grateful Dead did the acid tests and everything, right, just like the CIA did the acid tests, and
right. But
then all of this slapstick CIA comedy happens out of pure chance, not likely.
Right, but the problem is with the brain, you can see the connections that Trist has.
Well, and look who funded the Grateful Dead, Peggy Mellon Hitchcock of the Mellon banking family.
Right. And so you see now you start getting, basically, if you go back another step from the Mellons, you can see who they're related to and all of the connections into these banking families. So this is the thing, is that it couldn't be possible once you see these kinds of connections in their organizational form, right? How they relate one to the other. You can see that Alan Triss couldn't possibly have just been this lost soul that ended up by circumstance, ground zero of the LSD culture in the United States. I mean, just the fact that he is there with the Grateful Dead proves that this is a program, that it's organized.
Well, and then if we take a look at Robert Hunter, who was the other one? Was it him that wrote the Why Spy article in Forbes magazine?
I don't know.
Or was it the other one? I forget now, but it could have been John Perry Barlow, one of the two. But and John Perry Barlow, he's another songwriter for the Grateful Dead. If we click right here, he created the Electronic Frontier Foundation. We click right on that. Well, look at that. That's funded by George Soros. Oh, so it's a controlled movement. Tides Canada, Webster Tarpley. Oh, look at that. He funds Move On as well. Well, gee, why would George Soros be funding Move On? Why would he be funding Democracy Now! and other groups like this? And oh, look, George Soros was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Well, Gordon Wasson, who is the so-called discoverer of magic mushrooms, he was a chairman for the Council on Foreign Relations. There's Paul Warburg, Henry Luce of the former head of Time Life magazine.
Yeah, but Luce was the one who published Wasson's article.
Right, exactly. So now we when we go in here, we can see a visual representation of how these people are related to each other.
Exactly. And the fact and the nature of the relationships shows that it is absolutely impossible for this to be just random connections. It is as impossible for Alan Trist to have accidentally come from the ground zero of the British LSD culture to manage the Grateful Dead's the ground zero of the U.S. LSD culture, as it would be for, a computer to just miraculously emerge out of a Lego set accidentally. I mean, this just couldn't possibly happen. And so if this is a program, it's something that is has slithered into the political world, that has taken over the political system of Western culture, and it's something we have to get the hell rid of. This is something that we have to understand its effect on us, and create a more effective democracy, create a democracy that can circumvent the control of the oligarchs and of the weaponized anthropology they use against us.
And people might notice it very rarely takes me more than 1 or 2 clicks to get back to the same group of people. So just a second ago, I was here at the Century Club. I clicked on Bob Weir. Bob Weir is a member of the Bohemian Grove. Bohemian Grove was created by the Century Club. Click on that. Well, here's Gordon Wasson. Here's Alan Dulles. And here's Aldous Huxley. Right. And here's the CIA.
Right. So there you have it. There you have the connections that control us and a visual representation. And this is something that is interactive, and it's something that every person who listens to us, who does independent research, and who can make corrections or additions to the research that the brain represents, then it's an open source
right
information for all of us.
Not only that, if you do find an error, send us the link in the brain database, and then also send us the correcting data that you have, and we'll compare it, and we'll either insert it or we'll explain to you why the citation sent is incorrect. But likely, often I get emails from people every day, and I do my best to keep up on them, but I do plug in data from the public as it comes in too, especially if we can vet it and compare it to our existing sources. And if it matches up, we'll definitely stick it in here.
Right. And this is because, you see, this is how all of us, so everyone who's listening to this, can improve their thinking. Because here you're using real connections, real citations, actual facts to understand our history. When you use the brain, you get a completely different vision of the counterculture, right? Because you see the connections between people, like he's showing there, Vito Pelucas, the guy on the left with the long hair and the beard. But when you see the connections that he has, for example, to like the Rockefeller family, now suddenly the spontaneousness of the and kind of the
well, and look at who else he's connected to here. He's connected to Kenneth Anger, who created the Process Church. Of course, the Process Church connected to Mick Jagger and Paul McCartney, and was also related to the massacre by Jim Jones. Right. Let's see. Jim Jones is in here somewhere related to these guys, but
you see, this is how the real history of the last 100 years can become clear. You can't understand the counterculture of what you use to, recognize it is like Life magazine or People magazine or CNN, because they give you the weaponized anthropology version of history. Here's the real history. What we're building here is our real history. These are the connections that created this culture. And when you see the connections as they exist in fact, you see something completely different. What you see is malfeasance, malevolence. You see that basically this group was, then just cut back to that picture of Aldous Huxley.
Now, okay, sure.
Now, this is a great picture. And again, this is something that, would take a lot of people because that picture is not that well known. But here is Huxley making his one-eye representation. Now, this is an homage that Freemasons make to the all-seeing eye of God. And you'll notice that Keith Richards in his autobiography uses the exact same posture.
Well, and if people go to my series on music, mind control, and psychobiology with Dr. Hans Zutter, we show, in this series, hundreds of musicians doing this, using the same symbolism,
and so
promoting the same thing.
They create legacy. And it's hard to, when you see a single picture, when you just see the one thing, when you see Huxley, he could just be having a headache or whatever. But it's when you see this photograph and you use it in the connection to all of the other representations of symbolism by people who are media controllers, then you're starting to get a different understanding of our reality. And that's what the brain database is all about. I mean, that's a picture on the left of Ken Kesey, and that's the bus further.
Right.
And I want
I told you who contacted me last week, Joe.
Right, Kesey's kid.
Kesey's son, Zane, contacted me last week to scream at me that his father wasn't a CIA agent.
Good. Well, let's have his son.
Look at the database.
I just want to say, in case his son is listening, okay, we recognize your position, and we think it would be fantastic if you would come on and let us have a discussion about that. Because I mean, first of all, Kesey's employment by MK Ultra is not something that is possible to deny. I mean, he was employed by it. I mean, the question is, what was he doing for it? Was he just someone who was being experimented on, who was willing to take LSD and then be observed, or was in fact there was some other kind of training?
Well, and then when we begin to factor in One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which sells the official theme of the Archaic Revival,
exactly,
we see him getting dosed by Gregory Bateson, who again created the CIA.
Founded the CIA, exactly.
Okay, and then we see Kesey at Palo Alto, at Menlo Park, and he gets all of this acid, and then he creates the Merry Pranksters, and they travel around and they peddle the same agenda that he writes about in his book. And then almost everyone who is a member of the Merry Pranksters then goes on to write a book. Now, let's say you got a bunch of druggy friends and they're cruising around on the bus getting high. How many of them are going to go out and write a book about this and get all famous, like Dorothy Fadiman, his lover that married James Fadiman? She goes on to make UN Agenda 21 films. Her current husband, James Fadiman, is the one who's out there promoting microdosing with LSD right now. He was the last legal researcher for the CIA's MK Ultra program. And he also worked with Lockheed Martin making missiles and all this stuff, so spiritual. He was also a consultant on Changing Images of Man, version 1, which was created by Willis Harriman, a known CIA, Carl Rogers, who we know was CIA. He headed MK Ultra Subproject 97. Out of him came nonviolent communication and neurolinguistic programming. He was directly associated, again, with this guy. Gee, how long did it take us to bring up that guy Gregory Bateson again?
He keeps coming up. He keeps
coming up. So this stuff just repeats over and over. It's the same people. So right. This is the tie directly to the Merry Pranksters, though.
Right. I know. And that's exactly right. And you see, this is what I don't think that Kesey's son understands. I think that, he's looking for a piece of paper confession by Kesey.
We're having a big earthquake here. Hold on. Jeez. Welcome to an earthquake on the top of the San Andreas, ladies and gentlemen.
Are you okay now, Jan?
Yeah, I'm all right, but
are you still sick?
About a 4.5 or a 5 right there. So that was I'm literally sitting on top of the San Andreas fault line.
Well, just be prepared to leap one side or the other in case it starts to fissure. All right.
Right. Exactly. Well, thankfully the fissure is about a quarter mile that way.
Right. But my point is that I respect Kesey's son's concern about his father's legacy, and I understand how, as a son, he would want to defend it. And I wouldn't be surprised if he is simply what can be called a useful idiot.
Right. Well, it's possible.
He was never brought into the inner circle. There's no reason for Kesey to have done that. But I don't think that his son has ever seen how the archaic revival contains all of these individuals.
Right.
And
Well, I did send him this link in the brain database regarding his father.
But if he would work through this more methodologically, I think we could show him that there simply isn't any chance that his father was not part of an organized attempt to debase culture. And that the idea that his father with these connections would then accidentally, well, that's what, I'm just going to get a bus, paint it day gold clovers and travel around the country.
And go out and promote degeneracy all over the country, right. City to city.
Yeah, exactly. You see,
get kids to tune in, turn on, and drop out.
Right. Now you see, that's something that doesn't happen very often. In other words, you don't see it, often from people who take LSD. They say, well, I'm going to wander around the country in a bus with a group of crazies, somehow find the money or the capacity to get, hundreds of thousands of tabs of LSD, and I'm going to give it out to children. This doesn't happen every day. So a better explanation for Ken is that he is just part of the program. Because see, the other approach, which is he was just a madman, it can't really be justified because there's just too many social connections into individuals who are completely vetted, who are completely CIA, and that and Kesey was inside this context. So the idea that someone would accidentally fall into this is, I'm afraid, just not, it isn't defensible. And I would hope that his son would come on the show and we could spend a whole show and very carefully go through all the citations, explain the relationships, explain the archaic revival. And once he saw how his father plugged into that, I wouldn't be surprised if he's real. I mean, he could be, someone who's part of the program, but if he's real, if he really is innocent, I think we could convince him that, yes, my dad was part of something very evil.
Right. I agree. And I should also mention that we did not hear from Frank Joyce this past week regarding our invitation for him to come on and explain his public relations campaign and his similar background to Leary and to the whole Harvard team, et cetera, promoting similar agendas. So that invitation is still open to Frank Joyce if he would like to come on and explain how, as a white PR agent, he is going about promoting hatred against the white race and covering up all of the details and background information that Joe and I have been showing in the brain database for the last 50 minutes.
Yeah. So, and actually, I'll tell you, Jan, I would be happy to have anyone come on the show who is able to carry on a respectful conversation, and they can present their case against what we maintain.
Absolutely.
Because really, in all honesty, we have the goods, and we are able to support our case. And it would be excellent for the public to see, what would happen to someone who tried to just say, well, you're just flat out wrong. You're missing everything, that this is not real. No, it is. I mean, believe me, I'm sad to say this, but it is real.
Right. I mean, listen to this, Joe. This is one of the quotes. Back in California, Gregory Bateson, there's that name again, had maintained that Aldous Huxley, there's that name again, and another earthquake, out of Palo Alto VA Hospital. Through SD experimentation on patients already hospitalized for psychological problems, Bateson established a core of initiates into the psychedelic ISIS cult.
The psychedelic ISIS cult.
Right. Initiates. Okay, so Gregory Bateson, the head of the CIA, had initiates. No, what that is actually saying right there is Bateson recruited Kesey for the CIA.
Exactly. And you see now what, but you see here, but let me just point out something. When you compare Kesey and his connections to Al Hubbard, right? He's another Johnny Appleseed who gives away LSD to people, right? That he procures it somehow, he brings it in illegally. When you look at Al Hubbard, you have someone who is a completely outed CIA agent.
Yeah, he was actually an admitted OSS agent. I have letter. These, in fact, in the brain database under Al Hubbard, this is the man who had the exclusive rights from Sandoz Pharmaceuticals to sell LSD in the United States. He's the guy that supplied the CIA, ladies and gentlemen. And we have the documents here, but there's even one here that I've discussed in Spies in Academic Clothing. I'm not sure it's one of these here, but it's a document from the, and most of these are confidential, but it's a document that shows his relationship to the government, and these, how much more in your face do you need to get? Our investigations of current social movements affecting education indicate that drug usage prevalent among student members of the New Left is not entirely undesigned. Right there. That's from Willis Harriman. Willis Harriman was one of the key people behind MK Ultra and working for the CIA. So that's, being written by Willis Harriman here.
But you see, what I'm saying is that when you compare Kesey to Al Hubbard, what you end up with is so many connections and so much parallelism in behavior and in activity, and then to make the case that, well, Hubbard is a known and vetted CIA agent, but his twin in all of these activities, Kesey, this was just accidental. This was just an existential decision of, an artist that suddenly, wait a second. Hubbard had a cover story. Hubbard wasn't outed as a CIA agent for years. It's just like Gordon Wasson. Wasson is another one. Wasson is promoting psychedelic drugs, but he wasn't outed as a CIA agent until we got the primary documentation on the fact that he was paid to do Subproject 58 and write the Life magazine article. Well, this is the context that you need to understand Ken Kesey in. You see what I mean, Jan? Is that they are all promoting LSD. They all have the exact same social connections. In the case of two of them, we have completely primary documentation. I know what you're going to show here. This is really important what Jan is bringing up. Okay, now there you have it, folks. There is the individual who brought LSD.
The magic mushrooms.
But he's who created the psychedelic revolution.
Right. And he's hanging out,
He's not hanging out. He is the presiding member. Now, that is to say, he is leading the meetings.
And here's Frank Altschul, Hamilton Fish Armstrong. I've got letters between him and King Hussein.
Yeah.
And this is just.
Well, but you go back up. I mean, you've got the Warburg family. Hold on. There you have James Warburg. You've got Strauss. You've got Kenneth Lugg. I mean, what you're looking at here is basically the government and financial intelligence agency being represented by both sides of it, both the banking family and military intelligence. So now when you see that this Council of Foreign Relations meeting is presided over, right, by Gordon Wasson. Well, how does this affect the understanding that that's the individual who actually lied, who was an MK Ultra employee, and who started the psychedelic revolution in the United States? Doesn't it directly imply that the government is in back of this? And now when you look at Kesey, and see, these are the kinds of connections that I would bring up to Kesey's son. And I do hope he comes on the show, and I'm going to extend him an actual heartfelt invitation, Jan, because I can feel, I can sympathize with what he must be going through with our research. But I'm telling you, when you put the context of these individuals, when you start showing it, look, here's Wasson, here's the Council of Foreign Relations, here's the Warburg family, here's the Altschultz, and now here's the relationship with Al Hubbard. Okay, now you're telling me in that context that Ken Kesey was just an existential decision that was a bad one, suddenly to drive around the country and give away hundreds of tabs of LSD to children? I don't think so. I think that is the craziest idea I've ever heard in my life. It is obvious what he was. He's a damn government agent. That's what he was. That's what he was.
So, and So anyway, we're about at the end here.
Well, okay, listen, I just wanted to say, Jan showed you where the donate button is on Gnostic Media. Please attend the button. Jan needs help. Remember that CCN needs support too. We gave the instructions as to how to get to the donate button. It was a little difficult. So we're going to ask that maybe they can make it a little bit easier, but please donate to the network. It needs to exist. Attend Gnostic Media. Go to CaesarsMessiah.com. Buy my books. They're fun to read. Maybe not. Anyway,
I've read both your books. I enjoyed them.
There you go. They're good. Well, that couldn't be higher praise. No, listen, buddy. I'll see you next week. Thank you so much. Happy New Year to everybody.
Happy New Year, everyone. Happy holidays, everyone. And see you next Tuesday.
See you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The pursuit of a free, fair, just, sustainable world should be the focus of every person on our planet. The reason it is not is because people are kept distracted by the illusions and deceit propagated by the corporately controlled mainstream media. In recent years, the rise in truly informed, savvy researchers and journalists who have all taken to the air in various capacities has given rise to a new genre of media. We have seen the explosion of truly free and independent media, and thus the need to create an ethical live broadcast network that facilitated these brave and tireless souls became apparent. With a great amount of research and meticulous planning, Conscious Consumer Network was created. CCN is a first-of-its-kind broadcast network that is specifically dedicated to free and independent media with absolutely no government control, corporate sponsorship, or advertising. The live broadcast network runs full-time with an average of 25 shows and live broadcasts a week. The high-definition live stream is free to view and is accessible from any computer terminal with online access, including laptops, tablets, smartphones, and smart TVs. All shows are archived onto YouTube and are freely available to view in order to educate and inform as many as we can without imposing monetary limitations. CCN was successfully launched on the 1st of January 2015 and has gone from strength to strength as we have improved and increased the capacities and functionalities of the network, as well as an ever-rotating and improving lineup of content which is broadcast daily. CCN is blessed to be the home of some of the hardest-hitting, most cutting-edge, truly educational and informative materials. Catch interviews, reviews, and talk shows from the many different and beautiful perspectives from CCN's family of interviewers and broadcasters. Since the 1st of January 2015, we have produced over 800 shows. We have over 2 million YouTube minutes watched every month, and we have an average of 1 million hits a day on CCN's website. CCN is viewed in over 147 different countries and hosts broadcasters from 5 different continents. The time has now come to generate funding to keep CCN on the air for the duration of 2016. The total sum needed to continue broadcasting for 2016 is $60,000. This budget includes the replacement of computer equipment, the acquisition of secure servers, which are most needed as we keep getting hacked, plus the renewal of the broadcast license fee for 2016. This is a fraction of the annual budget used by mainstream media networks producing a similar quantity of content. This is what makes CCN so successful, unique, and accessible, is the ability to run a project of this size and reach on such minimal resources. CCN does not claim ownership over any of the material we produce and broadcast, as we firmly believe that information is the common heritage of all beings, and thus CCN belongs to you, the public, and it is up to you all to keep CCN going. CCN would like to thank those who have contributed to the network in the past with resources, content, information, time, and energy. We thank you for supporting free and independent media.